Have you seen a game and gone, yeah, that's a Northern Lion game? I mean, I know that could be any roguelike with strategy elements, but that's the first thing I thought when I saw today's game. Flickshot Rogues is a turn-based roguelike that comes out today, September 17th, 2025, for the price of $13 to $15 depending on your local currency. At least that's what the press kit says. It has you flicking around game pieces while working your way to beat the big bad, while avoiding getting hit like a pinball. Will the game bounce into your library, or will too much contact knock it out of consideration? That's what I'm here to find out, but before I begin, this key was obtained from PressEngine for the purposes of review. That won't change my opinion of the game in the end, but you should know that because of FTC guidelines, as well as the whole morals thing, you know? So, let's start with what you're probably here for, the gameplay. Each run has you choose a pair of characters, which you can switch between on each turn, but only can use one at a time. Each character will have a signature attack that they rely on and do damage in a specific way. For example, the Swashbuckler will do damage when you physically run into other pieces. Meanwhile, the Kabouterman, I hope I pronounced that right, will attack an area around him wherever he stops on the end of the turn. Now there are 5 characters in total you can unlock, 2 of them that are open at the start. And I personally like the Frogomancer, who does damage based on the number of frogs you picked up, and then mark enemies with yourself moving forward. In addition, you can choose a trinket to give each character an attack, a trinket for each character. It could be a trinket that sets enemies on fire, or even chain lightning to hit multiple enemies at once. Some of them are good at mobs, others are good at dealing damage, but not on the person you're actually hitting. But all of them are very useful in specific ways. But more on those combinations later, because I need to get to the nitty-gritty of the combat mechanics here. Each turn you will take control of your character. Pulling back on that little Batista will aim and show you the direction and power of your attack, and generally what path you will go on if you were to fire it at the combination you've chosen. Then to fire it, you just hit this button. Shorter distances will be more precise in showing you exactly where you're going to land or stop, while bouncing off walls and hitting other pieces will sometimes give you some general direction, but the further off from your original spot, the less information it'll give you generally. I think the game does get the control system right. It does allow for very precise hits and doesn't necessarily spell out what entirely will happen when launching your character. But there's enough where you feel confident with the information that it gives you to rely on it. There's not too much chaos added, but enough where yes, every flick does have a tiny risk of going wrong, especially when multiple enemies are involved. Now, enemies will choreograph their version of attacks for what they will do after you first go, and will show you information to work off of. For example, they may show you the direction they are going to move in, the area they may attack in, or will generally move at you like a homing missile. This information is important because really, this information is key in keeping your character safe. Hitting enemies and stopping outside designed attack areas or outside of their range, or behind barriers so that you don't take damage. Granted, like I said before, not everything will go to plan. You'll either misjudge how far that they can go, or they'll bounce in a way that you don't expect. And if you hit a character and they bounce in a way that you don't expect, that could be giving you major damage even if you're an inch or two off. So, how is the gameplay, you may ask? Well, the best way I can describe it is a B-. The thing is that when the game is working in terms of the combination of effects you can get with your character, the roguelike bonuses that you can get when you move along each path and choice, you can get some interesting builds. And you can have moments where you shoot the gap, getting around a few enemies and causing an avalanche of damage. I did enjoy the fact that the game isn't always about offense. There are times where just moving a character to pick up a frog, or even just move to be able to do a better move next turn was the right call. It's definitely not a game where you can just hope to Beyblade it up and let it rip. You do need to use your head and make some strategy. I do like the idea of some of the synergy of the trinkets and upgrades you can get with each specific set of characters. I like the idea of using my Frogomancer to cause chain lightning on multiple enemies at a time, setting up my shot so that I get a multiple of them and getting bonuses for multiple enemies being hit. I like the choice of getting an upgrade for my Swashbuckler that would cause him to speed up when hitting a wall. That added a whole new element for me to use in that case. That made me readjust how I looked at things. When the game was doing things like that and allowing me to really test its limits, it's fantastic. It's just that at the same time, I felt like it didn't push it far enough in certain cases, even at some basic levels. Like, all 5 characters basically feel like they have the same inert power and accuracy, basically their base stats. Sure, their attacks are different, but why not mess with the physics and make some lighter and easier to move or more chaotic? Now, I can't even confirm that's not the case per se, but it sure didn't feel like it when playing them. Especially with the dual hero system, I thought this would be a shoo-in to include, and would have added even more strategy on top of things. Maybe bringing out a bulky character to make a precise, slower shot would have been great. And even if there were consequences, like a curse that I shouldn't switch my character at that time, I'd take more damage, it would be willing to do it because, well, that's what I needed. And even with that said, there's a bigger problem, at least in my mind. In terms of the strategy element, the game is definitely missing some of the tools that I would expect in order for players to really take advantage of the situations they are put in. Now, I know there's some ambiguity in terms of some of the farther, launched pieces. You don't know what's going on there, but that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about, for example, is the order the enemies will go in when they attack. That's important in this game, because with playing fields sometimes being a little bit enclosed, and there being knockback, the difference between one enemy going first and knocking you into another enemy is incredibly important on more difficult runs to know. It could be the difference between taking 10 damage and 800. It doesn't help that the effective attack area can seem unfair at times. The thing is, I thought the effective area for a piece would be its base, aka if the base isn't in the attack circle, then it wouldn't be hit. And for a good amount of the cases, that seemed to be the case. Where that gets tricky, however, is at the top quarter of the piece, where the player model overhangs it. Telling where the circle starts and stops can be trickier than expected, and that's beyond the fact that there were times that I felt I was definitely safe, only for damage to still happen. Now, it became a little bit easier as I went through the game, but those moments did really stand out to me in terms of, wait, what could I have done? Could it been easier, like, an option to show, hey, you would be in that area of attack? Or, hell, just making it easier for me to see by making the model transparent on the top so I can see that piece. The weird part about this is that sometimes a lack of information can be something positive. Figuring out what to do based off clues or a lack of them can be enjoyable to a lot of people, but the clues gotta be obvious or at least make sense in context. But let me give you an example of where I think the game doesn't do a good job of that. See this screen here. See the monkeys on screen here with the red arrows in a circle around them. This is one of the boss fights, and these are some smaller enemies that have been spawned. I want you to guess what you think their attack is. Hell, I'll give you a multiple choice on screen here. So is it A, they do an area attack, then randomly fling themselves in one direction afterward? B, causing a status effect on anyone in that area in the red circle at the end of the turn? C, a thorn-like attack that damages anyone who touches the circle, being a boundary that you can bounce off of? D, a flame attack that damages anyone within the range outside the circle, but inside the circle is safe. Or E, none of the above. I'll give you a second. I would play the Jeopardy theme, but I really don't want to get a copyright strike. Is that copyrighted? Anyway, the answer is C. Please note, at this point, when you first find them in the game, you have no clue that you can't touch them. And so, even if you were to, you know, try to go around them, oh, all of a sudden you bounce off of them. Yeah, that's the kind of stuff where it's like, well, wait a minute. Can I look at a tooltip, maybe? Maybe it'll give me an indicate. There are no tooltips. There's no information. You really don't have a lot of things that you can find out from these characters other than your own knowledge. And at times, especially in runs where you are seeing them for the first time, that can be frustrating as all hell. But with that said, I also love when this game gets into situations where I'm able to hit an enemy outside of what they could do to attack me by attacking them. There are a lot of different layers of strategy here that I really do appreciate. And the thing is, this is one of those games where I could see my score changing drastically with the right patches and with the right updates over time. So it's a game that even though I may not want to play like right away, I will always keep my eye on in terms of the patch notes, because if it just tweaks the right things, I think this could be one of the heavy hitters in the genre. And so the base is there, it just needs a lot of tweaking. With my thoughts on the gameplay out of the way, let's touch on the presentation a little bit. I'm sort of two minds about the overall visuals of the game. They do the job and do have some fun designs. And there are little touches, especially with animation, that do help add a little bit of personality to it. Like when you lose with the Frogomancer and she's completely upset with her frog who's been knocked out. Those moments work, but at the same time, there's nothing that really oohs and awes me when it comes to the presentation, especially because of the nautical theme. I was hoping for a little bit more variety over the different levels, and there is a little bit, but it keeps to that nautical theme in ways that I don't feel like was necessary. I will admit that part of my problem with the presentation is that if I didn't know better, the developers may be Kermit the Frog, because they do sure like their shades of green. To the point where I do legitimately wonder how red-green colorblind players will react to this game, but it goes beyond that. I get that green can mean sickness, plague, and shades like olive really do a good job of getting that across so that you don't have to explicitly tell the player. And it's not bad at first in the early runs, but when you get into the mid-runs, where enemies start having around 90% of the color at points, using moss colors and almost rock-like colors, and then the later levels have blue and green backgrounds, with green leaves all around, and green frogs for the Frogomancer, and a green cloak for my secondary character, it really starts to feel like maybe a little bit more color variety would have gone a long way, because it starts to get boring to look at. And that's the thing, when it's that boring to look at, you start to, well, not enjoy it as much. And I don't want to nitpick it to the point where it feels like everything was done wrong here in terms of that. I do like several of the designs. I like the turtle designs in terms of the shell and how it's shaped and how the colors work on it. But in contrast with the other designs too, they all don't come together in a good package, at least in my opinion. Maybe using a little bit more tropical elements, like, you know, maybe a toucan for an enemy would have worked a lot, because that would have given you a little bit more of a color scheme to really work with. It's just that what you've got here ends up being repetitive and boring, which for a game like this is important, because unlike an open world where you're exploring and you have different angles, you're looking at a chessboard here, basically. And the chessboard will change over time, of course, but if you're looking at the same things over and over again, sooner or later you gotta change it up. I will say that the animation does a great job of showing you the effects of the actual gameplay, which does go a long way to making it feel impactful. This chain of events with fire, explosions, and the shaking of pieces in particular does make me think I did well and really draws my eyes to it. And that's what you should be doing in a roguelike game like this when it is strategy based. So kudos on that. And I do like the secondary effects, the aim circles and seeing where things are, the fire which comes across, it's crisp. And even with my other problems with the gameplay in terms of being able to see things, not so in terms of the actual visual effects. A lot of the little touches with these visual elements are well done here, which means that, yeah, there's talent in this team. I just think the design in terms of the overall vision could have been better. As for the music, I mean, it hits the themes of a tropical island with pirate-like adventure to them, and so it does create a good sense of background noise for the game. Granted, it's nothing to write home about, it does feel generic in a sense, but you'll probably want to play this game with a YouTube video on in the background anyway. It's one of those strategy games that, yeah, you'll pay a little bit of attention to in terms of, you know, when you're not actively making your move, but you'll have your focus on something else most likely. But take a listen, and you'll hear what I'm talking about. Where I do actually think the strongest element of the presentation comes is the sound design. Now granted, this is a strategy game. Some people may play with the sound off just because. But with that said, the sound does a great job of immersing you in the world just a tiny bit, but more so give you the information you need to make decisions. The pullback of the character and the Batista for him firing, having that winding sound, was actually useful in making me judge how much I was pulling back even when I wasn't fully paying attention to the visuals on screen. Hearing the slight bounces off walls or the explosion effects may not be the best quality in terms of the sounds themselves, but they all served a purpose to enhance the gameplay for me to know, yeah, those couple of enemies exploded, but I was expecting fire. What happened to that? Take a listen, and you'll hear what I'm talking about. As for the story, what the hell is the story? No, seriously, I know that roguelikes aren't exactly known for their story a lot of the time, but frankly, when I sat down to write this section, I literally went, wait, what was this game about? And after looking back at the footage, I still really don't know. The game doesn't really have a story. Like, it has a basic premise of beating a big bad to unlock treasure with a pirate, I think? But the writing isn't very clear. It doesn't really do anything to build this world, and everything's generic. Like, there's small explanations of what you're doing at times, but it's clear that the story wasn't even thought about in the main picture. So if you're someone who really needs story in roguelikes, this game is not for you. And literally, that's the end of the story element. I don't have anything else. It's not even real dialogue. I mean, the most story that I saw was actually the sort of intro screen to the game before the menu where you start the game. that sort of auto sequence, which is a little concerning because there's nothing like that in the actual game other than when you get to the final boss, which, okay, great. Why wasn't that in other areas? Anyway, not a lot of story. In the end, I believe that Flickshot Rogues has an audience, and it's a solid roguelike with a fun mechanic that can get a good chunk of players addicted to its turn-based combat. It's got some good, but not great, variety to runs, especially as time goes on from what I've played, and the presentation is solid with the small touches standing out in certain places, even though I still don't want to see that much green. It is, however, missing those pieces that would put it into the top of its category, with missing tool tips and explanations at times, and times where you feel the game isn't giving you what you'd hope from where it comes for a challenge, sometimes feeling unfair, but sometimes just not being what you hoped it would be. Maybe that's just me and my expectations, but I was expecting a little bit more use of the actual mechanics and the physics behind it. The roguelike genre has had so many interesting games over the last several years that are a little bit different, using mechanics that people don't expect. I mean, Balatro being a fine example. And Flickshot Rogues is interesting. It does remind me of games like Rollers of the Realm. It just feels like it has missing potential, and maybe some patches and some additional content may move it up the list. But when I think of games that I would want to get back to in terms of playing again in the roguelike genre, it's not at the top of the list. It's probably somewhere in the middle. In the end, because of that, I'm going to give the game a 75 out of 100. It's a niche buy, meaning that those who love the genre will find something that they will like here, and certain people will like it otherwise, but other people may want to wait for a sale. But that doesn't take into account my enhancer system, which takes the more subjective element of games and tries to match the game to you. If you fall into the following categories on screen strongly, add or subtract that score to the main score. If the first digit of your score changes, refer to this chart to see if the game lies in the buyability rating for you. Now, as you can see, this game will be divisive. There will be certain players who will enjoy it, especially those who are maybe playing it on the Steam Deck, playing it right before bed, and just want a little bit of strategy. But there also are going to be players who are going to hate this, especially those who really need that nitty-gritty information. This game does expect you to sort of flow with the punches, per se, and some people are going to find that irritating. If you made it this far in the review, I thank you. I know my content hasn't been consistent in terms of weeks, and you know what? That's going to continue because there's a lot of shit going on. I am working on playing through Silksong, and I will review it. It will be late. Of course, it's come out after 2 weeks, but it is a game that I will review. I think one of my best reviews I've ever done was my original Hollow Knight review. I think I added a bit of conversation that I don't think I saw anywhere else, and I really enjoyed breaking down that game. And here's the thing, I like Silksong, but spoilers, I may not like it as other people do. So you may want to watch out for that. I also think I will be reviewing Discounty. It is an interesting game that may not have been what I expected, but I'm still enjoying it. So if you want to see me stream more of it, go over to Twitch and I will stream it there. Or maybe I'll bring the streams over to YouTube. I wonder what people would want from that. If you do think you would want to see the streams on YouTube, leave a comment down below. This is the time of the year where I'm starting to get my overlooked list together, especially for the last couple of months. Like, hey, what games haven't I looked at that I really do need to? So if there's a game that you don't think got the attention that it deserves, and I'm talking about games with like under 500 reviews, usually under 200, but you know, depends on the year, leave them in the comment section below. Anyway, that's it for now. And as always, keep on gaming.